Alrighty, let's see if it's live. I think it's live. Here we are. Yes, excellent. Let me know if you can't hear me properly. Anyone that's coming in at the minute, I might move that and see. Give myself a bit more upper waist room or something. Align everything as it is. This is a live chat. If you're watching it later on, like I plan on having a bit of a provocative thumbnail and title to the video. So if you're watching this later on, sit tight or skip forward like 30 seconds, 40 seconds. I don't know. But I have 3 pages of notes, right? Because I am worried that I will be seen as, one of those woke lefty people. Like I often do get some, like I feel like if I'm referred to as anything in politics, people refer to me as one of those bleeding heart liberals, or a bleeding heart lefty. And generally speaking, I don't mind having that as the label that's thrown at my feet. Like I feel like bleeding heart lefties got everything that was worth getting for people on a broader national sense. In Australia specifically, bleeding heart lefties got people the 5-day working week. Bleeding heart lefties got people universal health care. Bleeding heart lefties got women the vote. They got Aboriginal people the vote. They got Aboriginal people counted in the census. Like I feel like a lot of the time people use the term bleeding heart lefty as if it's an insult. But if you want to throw that at my feet, I'll pick it up and I'll wear it as a badge of honor, because bleeding heart lefties have been the people, traditionally speaking, I'm going to pop that out. Traditionally speaking, they've been the ones that have made the most positive change, I think. But I don't want to be called one, so I've got a whole bunch of facts and I've got a whole bunch of notes, and I sort of want to discuss it with you guys and see if we can come to a consensus opinion together here as the squad, the squid squad, whatever you want to call it. My shoal, I want to see what you guys think, So I'm giving it a little bit, a couple more minutes. I think probably if you're watching this not on the live stream, skip to like the 4-minute mark. I'm gonna go start talking about Australia Day and the history of the dates and like the history of Australia Day. So the history of what we know now. Okay, so for my American followers who may not be up on it or know fully about it and stuff like that, it's basically like January 26th is Australia Day in Australia, and it's roughly the equivalent to July 4th. It's our Independence Day. We never became independent, just throwing that out there. We're still part of the Commonwealth, so we don't have an Independence Day. And some people could say, I guess the argument could be made really that if we became independent, we could have that date and this whole problem would solve itself, But I'll get to that and we'll get there, don't worry. But yeah, effectively the issue, and I've got a minute until I'm going to start going into it, so maybe I'll just wait a little bit more and just tell you what the issue is once I'm getting into it and stuff as well. There's a couple of people in here already. I'm just giving it time for a couple more people as well, because when we have a look, what time is it in Australia? I want to avoid the ire of some of my right-wing friends who will definitely slam me for this. And so, yeah, cool. It's 10 to 9 in the morning. They're not going to be awake. That's fine. I'll just message. Oh, that's cute. That's super cute. My mum had a beach holiday. I don't know why because she messaged it. All right, here we are. 20 seconds to go, and I'll start getting into it and stuff, right? But yeah, as I said, wary of being called a bleeding heart lefty or a racist, which is the two. I have an opinion that's not conventional, and people from both sides of politics here in America decide they hate me, like on the same video that I did about impeachment last week, right? I did a video on impeachment last week, and on the same video, in the same comments section, I was referred to as a bleeding heart liberal by one person and as a member of the alt-right by another person. And I'm like, come on, guys, can't we have a chat without being branded? But anyway, here we go, all right? I'll get into it. I've been scared that I will be branded by the Australian versions of black or whiteists or red or bluists, as Americans might refer to it. But yeah, I've written a shitload of notes because there is a storied history. G'day, guys. There's a storied history to Australia Day and the date of January 26th, right? So bear with me. I'm going to read out my 3 pages of notes and stop and explain bits and pieces as I go, right? So prior to 1770, Aboriginal folks obviously had their own traditions. Like, I feel like it's intellectually dishonest to suggest that Aboriginal people wouldn't have had some kind of annual celebration. You know, we're talking about the oldest living cultures, more than one, oldest living cultures on the planet. And what we refer to as dates and names and titles of, you know, like things like the Gregorian calendar and the different types of calendars, like lots of different people or societies have tried to come up with calendars and stuff, but every single society, from an anthropologist's perspective, at some point has had a celebration of harvest, you know, like, which is what then we needed dates for, to know when best to grow things and yield the most harvest, right? So to suggest that there was no annual celebration prior to British settlement, I think is a little bit intellectually dishonest. At best, intellectually dishonest. At worst, intellectual arrogance. You know what I mean? But anyway, wanted to mention that from the get-go. In 1770, on the 22nd of August, James Cook landed on what's now called Possession Island and claimed the east coast of Australia for Britain. Many people view James Cook as the reason that we celebrate on the 26th of January. They go, oh, that's the date that Captain Cook celebrated Australia. And, like, they're wrong. And they're conflating Australian history events with amongst each other, you know. And it's really not that hard. Like, I'm not saying remember every single date from every single person or anything like that, but, like, it's not hard to know when the first white people rocked up on Australian shores, you know, and it wasn't 1770 and it wasn't August 22nd, right? Which is when James Cook, like, he landed on Possession Island, which is a little tiny island that would be too small to show in this tattoo. Like, you wouldn't be able to get an ink blot small enough to show it on the east coast here. But they stopped there. They noticed some Aboriginal people on the coast of Queensland, and they were like, yo, let's up and repair our ship and fuck off before they get out here and kill us, right? Which was a thing. So you cannot factually claim that British people didn't know Aboriginals were here or didn't think Aboriginals were here. From the very first moment, British subjects, and that term will get important later on, British subjects, the very first time British subjects laid eyes upon Australia, the landmass we now know as Australia, they laid eyes upon Aboriginal people. So we've always known, for as long as we've known that Australia was a thing, we've always known that Aboriginal people were here. And this is just coming from a British perspective as well, right? Because the Dutch were trading with Aboriginal, like the Yolngu people in northern Australia now. They were trading with them for, you know, hundreds of years before the British rocked up. There's proof of cockatoos being within Egypt. You know, like a Holy Roman Emperor got a cockatoo gifted to him by a sultan in Egypt that he got from some Dutch person that they'd got from some Indonesian person from spices who got it from an Aboriginal person at some point, because there's only one part of the world where that type of cockatoo is native, and it's fucking in here somewhere, nowhere near Egypt, right? So yeah, anyway, that's, you know, there ain't a lot of papyrus in Australia, and by ain't a lot, I mean there is none, or there was none until British people brought papyrus over, sort of thing. And so, given that it's really hard to invent paper, it's really, or it's given it's impossible to invent paper, it becomes really hard to invent pens and paper because you haven't got paper and you haven't got the plant that you need paper from. But I'm going down a very long tangent here, so hang with me, stay with me, right? It's it's a very long storied history. But anyway, 22nd of August is when James Cook first got here and went, yo, there's land over there. In 1788, that's what I said, right? Yeah, in 1788, Arthur Phillip, so Captain Phillip, sorry, not Arthur, Captain Arthur Phillip and his convicts landed in Sydney Cove on the 26th of January with mind to start a penal colony. And this is the date that it's referred to as the date that we commemorate when celebrating Australia, is the date that Arthur Phillip rocked up and established a penal colony for Britain, all right? It's this date and this effort that is remembered and supposedly commemorated as Australia Day. But that makes little sense to me, right, as I'm about to explain why. Because these people were proudly British, right? Every single person that was on that boat with a mind to establish a penal colony that wasn't a prisoner. Like these were, not even talking about the fact that they're using literal slave labor from prisoners that committed crimes like stealing bread and cutting in line at a fucking for a royal something or other. Like this real strange crimes. I give you, like, if you want to in your own time, give it a Google because it's really interesting. Like there were some murderers and rapists that came across, but they were in cells next to people who had tattooed somebody without their consent, or people who were publicly drunken too often and stuff like that. Like, and so it's the breadth and variety of crimes for these people was it's fascinating to me, right? But unless you were an Irish freedom fighter, which many of them were, they'd been campaigning for Irish independence, and the king went, nah, fuck you, and yeet, see you later, go to Australia, right? Where as far away as you possibly can be, so as to not, foster some spirit of revolution, right? So send them over there and all that happens. If you weren't one of those people, you were keen on starting, you were British, you were proudly British, and you were keen on starting a penal colony, right? So, that happens. They consider themselves British at the time. In 1804, the Sydney Gazette lists commemorations for Foundation Day on the 26th of January. This is the earliest sign of celebrating the nation on January 26th, right? That's the first sign of a Foundation Day or anniversary day, as some states might end up calling it, or have ended up calling it and stuff, moving forward from 1804. But yeah, 1804, Sydney Gazette lists commemorations for Foundation Day on the 26th of January. 1804 is the earliest date that we have for a Foundation Day celebration. Worth noting, though, again, that these people were all proudly British and they were celebrating a British colony's prosper. It was a once-off event. So it was 1804. Fuck yeah. How good are we? We were criminals, but now we export wool and shit. How mad's that, right? And that's what they were saying on that date in 1804 in Sydney. In 1888, right, so 84 years later, and a big 84-year gap, in 1888, 100 years after Philip and Co. arrived, right, after the what's known in Australia as the First Fleet, after they arrived, 100 years after that, the holiday of Foundation Day was celebrated to commemorate the anniversary. So at this point, New Zealand was still a state of Australia, or a colony being run as a part of the New South Wales colony, and Australia wasn't a thing yet. So this is for reference and keeping in your mind, how long these things have been a thing for, right? So 1888, we decide that it's all right. It's going to be a national celebration on January 26th, which is it wasn't celebrating Australia Day. It was celebrating 100 years since Philip arrived, and it was a very British-oriented holiday and a very Britishly minded holiday because it was celebrating 100 years of a British penal colony. It wasn't celebrating Australia, right? And so on January 1st, 1901, okay, and we're skipping forward another decade or so here, but on January 1st, 1901, Australia as we know it becomes a thing, right? Except not really as we know it, but as most Australians think they know it, or as most Australians know it, they think it became the thing on January 1st, 1901, except, right, it was, okay, and we'll have a big conversation at some point. I'm going to work on my my rough history of Australia videos because I've got 3 still to come to hit you guys up with, and I'm really excited for those. Check out my history playlist if you want while you're here on my channel and on my feed and stuff. After you've watched this live stream, do that. But yeah, anyway, we were founded as a country. We became a country, and it was mostly to keep the Chinese out of our gold mines and property ownership. And again, not racist, that's a fact. Not bleeding heart lefty, that's a fact. I will show you the propaganda from the time that we still have in our national libraries and all that sort of stuff. It was shit. The Chinese are coming and taking all the gold out of our gold mines. What are we going to do? Well, the king doesn't really care. Let's federate, become a country, and we'll keep the Chinese out, right? Except they were all at the time, the founding fathers of Australia, whatever you want to call them. 1901 Australia was focused on Australian independence or independence for Australia so that it could govern itself and keep the Chinese out of the gold mines, as I said. But they were very, very focused on the fact that they didn't want to become some new thing that could then be treated as lesser, right? Australia was a country, but it was written into our constitution that we were British subjects, right? So we were subjects of Britain in an independent nation of Australia. And that's important to remember at this point, right? Because we were an independent nation and we were founded as an independent nation in 1901, but we were always, and we had that tie in our mind for a connection to Britain. There was always, even when that's the difference, I think, between the founding fathers of America and the founding fathers of Australia, right? The founding fathers of America had a big middle finger directed at King George, right? The founding fathers of Australia were like middle fingering the Chinese, not the king, and were trying to like mop up the king's mess because he didn't give enough shits about Australia, is what I'm saying, right? So that's important to remember at this point as well, for the point that I'm going to make. Australia became a thing on January 1st, 1901, but it was a thing full of loyal British subjects. Sean Eden, hey pimpin'. Hey Sean, how you doing, bro? But yeah, that's the first out of my 3 pages of timeline done, right? So the first ever date referred to as Australia Day occurs on July 30th in 1915, right? It was suggested by the mother of 3 soldiers as a means of crowdfunding for the war. And if you're shit on your history, that's the Great War, World War One. If you don't automatically hear the war in 1915 and connect the dots, I've connected them for you. It was World War One. The first ever date referred to as Australia Day occurs July 30th, 1951. Basically, a mum of 3 soldiers goes, well, shit, we need more money for the war effort. We need more money for soldiers. We need more money for the RSL, like the Returned Servicemen's League. This is a good idea. We don't have really a national holiday. Let's have one, right? And she suggests it to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister goes, hey, that's a fucking dope plan. And it becomes a thing, right? So the first ever Australia Day holiday is July 30th, 1915. The following year, because the war is still a thing, and the war is still happening, and wars cost money, cost more money than anything in the history of human existence. That's another thing as well. I was speaking to Americans the other day about if they could afford national health care. No one gives 2 shits about if they can afford the fighter jets and drones dropping bombs in the Middle East, right? Like it's a really weird discussion when it comes to being able to afford things. Like, war is the most fucking expensive thing in the world. The military is super expensive, but we don't talk about it as if it's a money pit, and I feel like we should. But anyway, July 30th, 1915, and it was a fundraiser, right? Like it was again, not people going, fuck yeah, how good is Australia? It was British subjects and people that referred to themselves as British fundraising for a war that was not Australia's problem. It was a very British war. And it was, like, as I said, do you need to go to the loo, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Sweetheart, babe, yeah. Shannon needs to, not Shannon, you're Shannon. Sophia needs to pee. But yeah, anyway, sorry about that. The kid was doing her best to stay quiet, but didn't want to knock on the bathroom door, and Shannon's getting ready for work. So anyway, back on my train of thought, right? It was British loyalists in World War One who were fundraising for a British effort for Australian soldiers. Can I just say as well, for Australian soldiers to be treated as fucking cannon fodder, right? Like it blows my mind that it took us so long to be pissed off with the British, because basically so long as Australian soldiers were coming from Australia to fight for the mother country, we were being treated as shields. We'll just plop some Australians into this bit, or we'll plop some Australians over there and this will happen, fucking Gallipoli only happened because the British Navy went, oh yeah, that'd be a good spot to attack, and miscalculated where that fucking spot was. So instead of rocking up to a nice calm beach where we might have been able to, actually get some ground troops in and stuff, we came up next to a fully armed, fully red, turrets dug in and operational Turkish army, and we were fucking gunned down like fucking dogs, right? And it still took us 70 odd years to stop referring to ourselves as British subjects. Like the fucking, don't get me started, right? But anyway, you've got me started and I'm here. First Australia Day, July 30th, 1915. And it was the mother of three sons, all considered themselves British loyalists. It was a fundraising effort to fight the war. The following year, they had another Australia Day, second ever Australia Day. They tweaked the date to be on July 28th in 1916 because it was a Sunday or something. I don't fucking know. They tweaked it, brought it forward 2 days because it worked better with their scheduling, right, for 1916. Those are the only times that we had an Australia Day up. Those two Australia Days, that's Australia Day, right? Those are the first two Australia Days. Everything else is Foundation Day or Anniversary Day, celebrating British achievements, okay? So by the year 1935, all of the states in the country had a holiday on the 26th of January, which is when we currently celebrate Australia Day. Every state, though, none of them referred to it as Australia Day at that point. By 1935, there were Foundation Day or Anniversary Day, right? Which was basically, depending on what state you were in, it was a celebration of the British arrival and the setting up of a British penal colony. Not the prosperous nation, not the wool trade that we had fucking boomed with, not the cricketing teams that had gone and represented us and fought and beat Britain, not the war efforts that Australians had gone to go and die for our own rights and livelihoods and all that sort of stuff. None of that was being celebrated on January 26th at all, right? It was British arrival, and that was what was being celebrated. And as of 1935, every state had a Foundation Day or Anniversary Day protest, and as a result, from 1938 and every year since then, right? So in 1938, the very first protest, or referred to as a day of mourning by Aboriginal people. Again, you can call me a bleeding heart lefty if you like, but these are facts that you can Google yourself. 1938 was the very first organised day of mourning, right? So realistically, if you look at it on face value, you can probably make the argument that Australia Day has been being protested longer than it's actually been a thing, right? So there's that there as well. Aboriginal people, every state had a Foundation Day or a not Survival Day, what's the word? A Foundation or an Anniversary Day. That's it. Every state had one of them, and the Aboriginal peoples, many cultures, not just one, were protesting it pretty much from the get-go, right? Where am I? I lost my place. With Australia Day being a fundraising tool for people who still consider themselves as British, generally used in June or July. Various Indigenous peoples began the Day of Mourning protests in 1938 as a response to Foundation Day. Aboriginal people have been protesting Australia Day since before it was called that. It's not a new thing we're talking about. It's not suddenly inner city lefties and woke fucking millennials that have decided this needs to be a discussion point. We've been having the discussion for as long as we've been having the day. Right. But yeah, where are we? We fast forward to 1946, right? 1946, and it's agreed upon by the state and federal governments that we all celebrate on the same day. So whether it's Foundation Day, Anniversary Day, whatever day it is, we're going to celebrate on that day. Whether you call it Foundation Day or you call it Anniversary Day or you call it Arrival Day or Tasmania didn't call it any of those things. But I mean, at the time it was Van Diemen's Land. I think back in the day, the very first founding holiday or national holiday that was celebrated in Tasmania was the Hobart Regatta, which is like a fucking boat race or some shit. I don't know. But anyway, the Hobart Regatta was then brought to be on the same day as all the other Foundation Day, Anniversary Day celebrations, right? And that was in 1946. It was agreed upon by the state and federal governments that we would all, no matter what you called it, have that holiday together, and that it was on January 26th, right? So 1946, January 26th, we celebrate the arrival of the British penal colony and the arrival of the British and the setting up of the British penal colony warts and all of how painful that was. Let's celebrate all the things that happened as a result of the British penal colony, right? And this is 1946. We weren't yet counting Aboriginal people as people in our census, right? We weren't yet, this is 1946 we're talking about, and they go, yep, again, still British subjects going, yeah, cool. Let's be happy about what happened from that date forward, right? Fast forward about 40 odd years again. I know we're jumping in history and some people are going to claim that that's me cherry picking, but I feel like these are the relevant aspects of Australian history to the date and to the term Australia Day. So if you're with me at this point still and you disagree, I don't know what the fuck else I can say, right? But 1984, November 22nd in 1984, the Australian Citizenship Act is finally amended in such a fashion that it meant Australians were no longer British subjects. So basically, the Labor government of the day changed the fucking shit, changed everything up, and we tweaked rules on that day. Like that day was the day Australia became independent. If you're a historian in Australia, you don't look at January 1st, 1901 as the day we became independent because of the things I said before. It was a very, very focused attempt to keep Chinese people out of gold mines while maintaining our British sovereignty, if that makes sense, or our British connection. On November 2nd, 1984, we made it so that we were an independent nation whose Governor-General has to be Australian and is appointed by the sitting government of the day. Prior to that point, right, prior to the November 22, 1984, the Governor-General was appointed by the Queen. The Governor-General didn't have to live in Australia. He could just come to Australia whenever he wanted, like every now and then, right? Like lots of different rules applied to Australia on a higher, broader sense. And the government of the day in 1984 on November 22nd went, right, nah, mate, fuck yeah. We're going to be our own thing like we said we were going to be 83 years ago, right? And so one of the things that happens as a result of Australian Citizenship Act being amended was that Australians weren't referred to as British subjects anymore or weren't considered as British subjects anymore. And from a legal government perspective standpoint, we were not presenting ourselves as British subjects anymore. We were owning our own power. We were owning ourselves as Australians, and we were coining that term. Okay, so that's 22nd. That's me done with page 2. Don't worry, page 3 is a lot shorter. In 1994, yes, less than 30 years ago, right? So less than 30 years from this very point, 3 years after I was born, years after probably people that are watching this is born. I mean, let me know if you're watching this and you are born after the year 2000, because that would be interesting. I want to know if I have any people under 20 watching and stuff, or under 21 now, I guess you'd have to say. But in 1994, less than 30 years ago, the national government of the time, fuckwit John Howard, that we've spoken about before, that I've fucking put bombs under and everything, like literally worst prime minister ever, right? Like in the history of the country, he fucking sucked. Just because he was the second longest serving, that's because it's cool to be politically apathetic in Australia. It's cool to not give a shit about politics in Australia, and that's why fuckwits like John Howard can remain as successful politicians for a long period of time. You know, like there's this fucking apathetic Zen-like state of politics not being cool and therefore not being spoken about, and it actively makes minorities suffer, right? Like it just does, whether you're a person of color or a person with mental health problems or a person from the LGBTQIA spectrum, like regardless of where you are in society, if you're a minority, you're behind the times and you're behind the 8 ball when it comes to liberal leadership, and John Howard especially. And he was a cunt. And I will, like till the day I die, if anyone ever wants me to explain why, I will explain in thesis format, 4,000 words at a time if I can, all the reasons why John Howard fucking sucked. This is one of them, right? The national government of the day changed each state's foundation day and anniversary day to be Australia Day because we were no longer a British colony and therefore shouldn't be reveling in the success of one. like John Howard's whole point was, we're Australian. Let's talk about all the good things about Australia. He tried to change the history curriculum in high schools and stuff as well to remove the black armband view of history, which is a fucking wank stain of a thing to say, right? Like, he's just a douchebag. It's not a black armband view of history to actually look at history and describe it as it happened. Like, that's not a black armband view. That was a fucking horrible thing to have done to a broad range of people, and we're allowed to talk about it, and we should be teaching our kids the fucked up aspects of what we've done as a society so that they grow up not knowing to do it again, it's a no-brainer to me. But anyway, as I said, 1994, the government changed the idea to change the fucking holiday to be Australia Day, not to be Foundation Day or Anniversary Day or anything like that. And it's been that way ever since, unchanged. Given everything I have just told you and everything we've spoken about and all the things we've said, I can understand and I agree that January 26th is not the day we should be celebrating the prosperous nature of our nation, right? That is not to say we shouldn't celebrate the prosperous nature of our nation, though. Yeah, like, we should have a day like the 4th of July, or like, we should have a day where we celebrate and we have a barbecue and we listen to the Hottest 100 and we all chill out with our family and friends and, like, talk about the notion of Australian. What does it mean to be Australian? What do we want Australians to be seen as? How do we want, because, perception is reality. How do we want to be perceived on a global scale? How do we want to treat other Australians in a logistics sense, and all of that sort of stuff, right? We do need a day to celebrate. 100%, not saying don't celebrate being Australian. Celebrate being Australian. Go and have a fucking VB, wear a fucking flag for your cape, like, whatever. Doesn't bother me. I think we should have one too. But I have a bunch of other dates that I think might work better than the anniversary of the date that the British upper class arrived in Australia with a bunch of slaves that we were then descended from. Like, if you're proud of your British heritage in Australia and that you were a part of that first fleet, you have been so fucking, like, twisted in your mind. You've been educated and propagandized to so much that you've forgotten the fact your ancestors were slaves, bro. Like, if you are of British descent and you were not, like, they were not a part of the Navy, you were a slave. Like, your family were slaves. That is not something that you should be celebrating, as far as I'm concerned. That's a horrible thing to do. I don't care if you stole a loaf of bread. In fact, I don't even care if you murdered someone. You're not a slave. That's not okay. You can have your civil liberties taken from you. You can have your freedoms taken from you, and there are consequences for your actions. Slavery is not a consequence for someone's actions, and it is not a justifiable process, no matter where it is, right? And that is how they brought Australia up, was through indentured servants through the penal colony that arrived on January 26th. And as far as I'm concerned, that is not something to be celebrated, right? Regardless of what color your skin is. You can make the argument that the genocide of various Aboriginal cultures started on that day, right? On the January 26th, 1788. But the people who you make that argument to, or the people that discredit that as an argument, are never going to change their mind based on Aboriginal feelings, right? The people that don't care that this was a date that commemorates British arrival and therefore Aboriginal suffering, the people that don't acknowledge the Aboriginal suffering are never going to acknowledge it, right? However, I feel like those people should and could acknowledge the fact that there were white people suffering as a result of that decision as well. And, like, it was a lose-lose. No one was winning, like, it wasn't a fun time. And so it shouldn't be the day that gets celebrated, I don't think, like, that's just my opinion. And again, call me a bleeding heart liberal all you like, but here are some alternate dates that I think would be good ones, right? Henry Lawson's birthday, which is June 17th. Henry Lawson, if you don't know who he was, check him out. I'm going to do a video on him for the history playlist eventually. But he was basically this poet that was fucking cool and went round on a tour of Australia, basically getting up on soapboxes. Like, this is before the internet and the phone and all that sort of stuff, right? Like, he literally went from town to town, stood in their town square and went, yo, let's federate. Let's be a nation, And he was I mean, he was racist. They were all racist, but he was the least racist out of them, and he was the most welcoming and the nicest of them all. So Henry Lawson, the guy that is often credited with the idea of Australia, give it to his birthday, maybe June 17th. Eddie Mabo's birthday. So Eddie Mabo was the first guy that basically, in a legal sense, he took the Australian government to the Supreme Court. Like, he took the government to court to say that bit of land is mine, you can't take that. And he succeeded, right? And so he got Native Title Act. Native Title went through and all that sort of stuff. And it was a momentous moment in Australia. Was huge in Australian history, is what I'm saying, right? Like that government ruling, well, that Supreme Court ruling. Sorry, the court ruling, or was it Supreme or High? I think it's the High Court in Australia. Actually, I'm getting too many Americanisms into my mind. But anyway, it was a decision made by the highest court of the land that he was right, and he was. He was justified in his claims, and he was what's the word I'm looking for? Basically the government couldn't kick him off his land and mine it, in a nutshell. And while we're speaking on it, like January 26th and the date changing and everything, some actual concrete things that would actually impact the lives of Aboriginal Australians better would be holding true to that Native Title Act. There are a couple of mining companies in North Queensland at the moment that are literally trespassing on Aboriginal land, and I can't remember the group off the top of my head, and I feel like an ignorant cunt for now just saying Aboriginal instead of the actual specific grouping of people that are being trespassed upon, and have now literally the government just decided, the state government was like, all right, that actually we change our mind. You're not entitled, that's the word I was looking for before. You're not entitled to that land anymore. We're going to give it to these people because there's some fucking uranium underneath it or something. And so now they're digging underneath it. And it's like, we could, I should have mentioned this 36 minutes ago at the start of the video, but there are a plethora of things that are more important to Aboriginal people and that would make a significantly larger difference to Aboriginal lives than changing the date. Changing the date is insignificant when in comparison to the hollowed out nature of mining underneath the Native Title includes the ground underneath the one, like, you know what I mean? Like, and it should, and it did at the time, but they didn't think about all the different loopholes that could be navigated through by savvy lawyers with their fucking pockets lined with cash and their souls defunct of morality, right? Like they're just, if we could actually hold Native Title to what it was supposed to be and intended to be, that would be way better than the date of January 26 changing, or the date of Australia Day changing. If we could actually fund the proper irrigation of proper pipes and water systems to the remote communities in Australia that need them. We're talking about the remote community over here called Bundawindi that I had to replace the irrigation systems for with my own money, with my inheritance a couple of years ago, because the Australian government said there weren't enough people out there. There were 40-something fucking people out there, but because it was too remote and too much of a community, it was their lifestyle choice to live out there, and they just had to, the drinking water they had, like, mind you, their normal natural way of life, places had been fenced off, right? So their normal places they'd go to for water had been fucking fenced off by stupid companies like Nestle or something like that, right? So to say, oh, you want to live in your remote community village, do it as you always did it, they fucking can't. You put fences up. That's not a fair assessment, right? So if you're going to put fences up and say, all right, you want to do what you normally do and do what you have historically done, do it over there. Here is some taps to that region as well. You need to actually make sure those taps aren't seeping in uranium in their fucking drinking water and killing them. You know what I mean? And so, again, there's multiple remote communities of Aboriginal people that, because the land hasn't been judged as profitable enough by the Australian government, they're treated, worse than animals, like we fucking drop carrots and fucking shit it's a mad drought at the moment in Australia. And because of all the wildfires, all the fucking natural feed for kangaroos and deer and all that sort of weird shit, right? Yeah, we have deer in Australia, just not as many. Like all the different wild animals and stuff. And we can crowdfund to drop fucking food to the kangaroos in bushfire time, but we can't crowdfund some actual proper pipes for people. Like, what? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, none of it makes sense to me. And I'm hoping you guys can either make sense of it or rage along with me, right? But yeah, Eddie Mabo, that's basically what I was saying. Yeah, so like this, what I should have said at the start was there are a whole plenty of other issues, like incalculably high amounts, you know, like fucking the abalone fishing, like being able to fish for abalone or abalone. I can't remember how it's pronounced. I've only read it. It's basically a clam, right? Like it's basically this type of clam or cuttlefish type thing that up until the 1980s, Aboriginals were allowed to cultivate, farm, eat, cook, however, like they were allowed to have as many as they want out of the ocean, basically. But then in the 80s, when when Chinese people realized that what they eat and their delicacy of like clam fish thing was extremely similar to the one in Australia, but they had like 3 off their coast and there are like 18 million off the coast of Australia. As soon as the Chinese realized that and started, like exporting these clams from our waters, right? The Australian government made it illegal and put a whole bunch of different fucking tariffs and hoops to jump through in order to catch abalone, right? This is the same fish that Aboriginal people have been eating since time immemorial, but now suddenly they're not allowed to use it because the government want to export it and take a cut for tax purposes and stuff like that. Fuck those guys. And absolutely, if anyone is trying to say that this is the biggest issue in Aboriginal Australia at the moment, they don't know what they're fucking talking about. And Aboriginal people have far, far bigger issues that are more pressing for them than this. But I am not an Aboriginal person. I am a fucking YouTuber on fucking stream right now, and I have all the time in the world on any given day to look into the facts and everything like that. And so my opinion on the date changing is that there are bigger fish to fry and we should fry them first, but we can also walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So your inner city liberals, bleeding heart lefties like myself can explain to the unwashed masses and the people that don't understand and just fucking squawk without actually listening, right? You can leave it to me and I will explain why the January 26th is shit. And I feel like I have, right? Which I'm happy for. But as I said, I'm still going throughout the potential dates that I think, from an Australian historian's perspective, would be cool to have a national day of celebration on, right? So Henry Lawson's birthday on June 17th, as I said. Eddie Mabo's birthday on June 29th, as I said. The day that Bungaree got naked, right? Which was July 16th. I've got a history video. Check it out in my history playlist if you can. But it's on Bungaree, right? And he was the first Aboriginal, and he was the first Australian, really, first guy that was born on the landmass we now know as Australia to circumnavigate Australia in a boat. He did it with Matthew Flinders in Matthew Flinders' shit, Australian historians and Australia more broadly refers to Matthew Flinders as the first bloke to circumnavigate Australia, but he had a whole shit full of people with him. One of them was an Aboriginal. His name was Bungaree. And as far as I'm concerned, that gives him more legitimacy because Flinders considered himself fucking British. You don't get to be the first Australian to do something if you're not considering yourself Australian, that's just my perspective, right? And so he took Bungaree with him on that trip, circumnavigating Australia. And there was one point in Queensland where not in Queensland, but off the coast of Queensland, like about here-ish, in a nutshell. They hit a whole bunch of, it wasn't here-ish, actually. I'm pretty sure it was down here-ish. Basically, they hit the Great Barrier Reef, right? Which is unprecedented in the world. Nobody fucking know, they just went bang, hit and went, oh shit. That great big reef, it forms somewhat of a barrier between us and the fucking landmass, right? What are we going to call it? Great Barrier Reef. Right, anyway. So he hits the Great Barrier Reef and they have to go on the land to get a bit of wood to get some wood to fix their ship and stuff, right? And so they go onto Possession Island or whatever it was. No, not Possession Island. That's fucking Jimmy Cook way back when. They go up near Moreton Bay. I don't actually know where that is, but it's somewhere vaguely from here to here on the coast, right? And so they hit the Great Barrier Reef and they're like, all right, well, I guess we'll just row inland, cut some trees down, put them up on fix it and we'll be good, right? And so as they're doing that, Aboriginal people see them and they're like, holy shit, we're going to kill these motherfuckers, basically, right? So local Aboriginal people in Moreton Bay are like, yo, we don't take kindly to your people in these parts, right? And so Bungaree, who was the only Aboriginal man on the voyage with Matthew Flinders and with all of those people, strips down naked, right, in front of all these Aboriginal people who literally have spears, targeted, locked and loaded, ready to kill them all, and he strips down naked in an effort to explain that he's like them, because he was from fucking, I can't remember where, but I think it was, somewhere in Sydney. One of the Sydney Aboriginal nations he was from, and they were up in fucking Moreton Bay, which is a distance of something like ridiculous, it's the equivalent of taking someone from like Eastern Russia to Italy and being like, yo, talk to the people here in the same language. It's not going to fucking happen and it's not going to work. But he stripped down and he got starkers and he was like, yo, I'm naked. I am one of you. We are all the same, regardless of skin color, regardless of what we look like. We're all humans, right? Please don't kill us. And they didn't. And they exchanged gifts and that ship was allowed to keep sailing. And it went on to become the first ship to circumnavigate Australia. So I think the day that he got naked could be a cool day to celebrate Australia Day on, because I don't think there's anything more Australian than avoiding conflict by getting naked and fucking partying, you know what I mean? And giving and receiving gifts. I reckon that's fucking pretty Australian, that happened on July 16th. When we stopped being British would be awesome as well. When it was removed from the Australian Citizenship Act or whatever it was called, that we were loyal British subjects. When we became Australians and removed the British subject part of our constitution. That was November 22nd. That would be a cool day to celebrate as far as I'm concerned, because fuck the Brits. And at the point that we did that, right? And this, I might cop a bit of heat for this and probably justifiably so I'll apologise in advance. But from a white Australian's perspective, right, it is awfully convenient to be able to go, that wasn't Australians, that was England. That was Britain. Britain did that, and Britain are fucking assholes, right? Because they were, and we aren't. Australians are good, Australians are all right. If you look past all the fucking horrible things we're currently still doing to Aboriginal people, you are literally 75% of the total number of people being taken from their families during what Australians refer to as the stolen generations are being taken today as well, because of saying that the justification is that parents aren't good enough or they need to go into foster housing because they're not raising them to a proper standard and stuff like that. And literally people are Aboriginal people are still being taken from remote communities and put into fucking foster homes and brought up. It's still happening today, right? So if that could change, that'd be amazing. But it's we could say that was the British, we are Australia, and make a very firm standing point of what Australia accepts and what it doesn't, because thus far we have celebrated and glorified and commiserated British acts on this land or acts by British subjects. And since November 22nd, 1984, that has not been the case. We were Australians, at that point. Alternatively, we could do federation. If you're a history purist and you don't believe that that's actually the date we became independent and you think we did back on January 1st, A, you're wrong, do more research. B, we could just change it to then. Federation, why not? We can change it to the January 1st and it can be the day that, Australia became a federated nation, even though that was of loyal British subjects. The day Canberra was founded was March 12th, right? So basically when Australia first became a nation in 1901, the temporary Parliament House and all that sort of stuff was in Melbourne. Melbourne and Sydney were arguing about where it should be, because Sydney was where the British, where Australia was founded, quote unquote, was Sydney, where the British penal colony arrived and all that sort of stuff, right? And so Sydney was like, well, Parliament House should be here. And Melbourne was like, well, fuck yeah, we've got all the cool people, right? We've got all the people that are making decisions and stuff. We'll have it here. And then the country was federated and they went, let's do neither and let's make Canberra be a thing, right? So a couple of, a year later or a year and a half later, I don't fucking know the specifics, right? But March 12th, that was the day that Canberra became a thing and Parliament House first sat in Canberra, right? So the government of Australia, regardless of the fact that they were, by their own wording, governing British subjects, right? They were the first Australian government in a unique building designed for that purpose, right? So that was March 12th. That would be a cool date to celebrate as well. The referendum that I was talking about before, like we had to have a fucking national referendum, right? This is how fucked the British were. We had to have a national yes or no vote in fucking, like, I can't even remember. I didn't write the specific year, but it was much closer than you'd think, right? A fucking ridiculously a close time frame, right? We had to vote on whether Aboriginal people were people, right? And so, I mean, that wasn't the exact wording, but it was, we were voting on whether Aboriginal people should be counted in the census. And the point of the census was to count all the humans in the country so that we could accurately provide for them, right? So the census on do we count Aboriginal people in the census, the referendum on do we count Aboriginal people in the census is literally asking the question, do you think Aboriginal people are humans? Yeah. And thank Christ, Australia came back with something like 95, or I think it was 91%, right? So 9% of Australians are fucked in the head, or were at that point. Maybe that percentage has grown. Maybe it's decreased. I'll let you decide on your own, right? But yeah, the date that occurred was May 27th. And that also, you have to work? All right, here, give me a kiss. Yeah. Love you. You look amazing. Thanks. That's right. Yeah, actually, come and show my people what you look like. Because you're like, do I look okay? You guys can tell me if she looks okay. She cut her hair. It looks amazing. Check it out. She's beautiful, right? Anyway, love you. Love you. None of them will reply. There's 5 of them watching, but none of them are going to reply about how you look because they haven't been replying so far. Right, yeah. But I love you. See you later. Yeah, so basically, referendum of Aboriginals, whether they were people or not, May 27th as well, right? And so that is the day that the second Parliament House came in as well. So the day that we went from Parliament House and built a whole new building and everything, like back in the day, the new building was May 27th as well. So if you want to go on the Parliament House, the anniversary date, which I said for, I think it was March 12th. Yeah, the day that Canberra was founded. If you want to go for the second house and the second one they did that, it lines up with the referendum for when if we wanted Aboriginal people to be classified as people, and it also lines up for when the first grouping of people for Australia's federation, right? So the year before, in 1900, Henry Lawson and a whole bunch of people met together, and it was on May 27th, and they were like, yo, Australia should be a thing. And it became a thing on the 1st of January, you know what I mean? But that process started on May 27th. And so I think May 27th really is the date that I think Australia Day should be on. But the whole reason it's not is because May is fucking cold and wet and miserable in Australia. And so people like having a holiday in January where they can have a barbecue outside with their mates, listen to music and get drunk, you know? And I get that. People enjoy that. And I'm not here to like ruin people's enjoyment of things, you know? I'm here to try and explain the context of why it is such a shit day to have the day on, right? Like literally since fucking but what's it say? Sorry, bro, I was on my Xbox. I can't reply on there. Oh, that's all good. You're all good, bro. You're all G. Don't stress. But yeah, like it's literally like to me anyway, it was see you, babe, love you. Say hi to your dad for me. See if you can grab me envelopes as well, please. What? See if your dad can grab me envelopes. I'll try it, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's all good. I'm learning. I didn't even know all this about Australia. Well, I'm glad, right? I'm glad that I'm teaching you, which is good because like it annoys me sometimes when people talk about January 26th like as if it's always been Australia Day and that's always been a thing and that's, you know, it's disrespectful to not have it on that day because it's like it was only 1994 when it became a fucking thing nationally, you know, like, and it's like, yeah, the day has been celebrated on since the 1830s or something, but that's not like, we're not celebrating the same thing that they were anymore. We're celebrating Australia. We're celebrating a nation that provided native title to Eddie Mabo. We're celebrating a nation that it voted 91% in favor in a time period where, you know, like the powerful were dense enough to put it to a public vote, right? And public votes, like, again, I'm going to sound horrible and people are going to hate me for it, right? Because I sound conceited, but like your average person is dumb as fuck, right? Like your average human being is stupid. And 49% of them are stupider than that, right? Like they're even dumber than that because it's the average, right? And so running an entire country on a yes/no basis, like that's why we don't have referendums for every decision that needs to be made. It's why we have representational democracy, because we go on a broad point. We recognize most people are fucking stupid, so let's all agree on that one who isn't stupid making the decisions, right? And that's how it's rolled. And so referendi or referendums, or referendae, I think it is, as a means of making a decision, right, are generally put in by powerful people who think they can trick the public into giving them what they want and getting the other smart people to shut the fuck up about a thing that's a valid issue, right? That's basically what referendums are. It's what fucking, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Howard again, ding, 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 for the referendum election within our lifetimes, right? But like in general, people are stupid, and therefore referendums can have the wrong decision be made. But 91% of Australia made the decision like, yeah, nah, that's why is this even a referendum, mate? Do your job, and legislate, And I just feel like there's May 27 would be a good day. January 1st would be an all right day. Like, and people to that say, oh, but that's already New Year's Day. We already get a holiday for that. You know what I mean? And it's like, yes, you are correct. So maybe we have it on January 2nd then instead. Like we celebrate, January 1st. That's the day that we became a nation, but it's also a public holiday. So we're going to have 2 public holidays in a row. Like, just make it a fucking mad weekend. That'd be sick. That'd be one of the most Australian things you could do, right? Go, you know what? I know there's already a holiday on that day, so we're just going to have a national bender. Like, no fucking, like, literally national holiday. You get Monday and Tuesday off. Friday the week before it as well. Let's just have a 5-day fucking piss up. That'd be Australian as fuck, right? But we can't do that because, people are too afraid that they're upsetting or they're appeasing inner city lefties, And it's like, it's not inner city lefties that have the issue. I mean, it is now. They've jumped on board, but running nose because I've been talking for too long. Like it is, inner city lefties are the ones bringing it up and talking about it at the moment because Aboriginal people have more pressing issues to attend to, you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean it's not an issue that should be attended to. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, effectively. But anyway, I'm going to read some comments again. As Americans, we probably know less about Australia than you think. Oh, bro, I know how, like, Americans know nothing about Australia, basically. We're well knowing on Canada and Mexico than Europe. I even feel like even in school we were never taught much about Australian history. Yeah, no, you quite rightly you wouldn't be. It's a country of 23 million people on the other side of the fucking planet. It's, broadly speaking, absolutely irrelevant to you. And I wouldn't advocate for Americans to learn about Australia, which is, again, I'm going to piss some of my Australian people, friends and whatnot off by saying that. But on a global scale, Australia is fairly irrelevant and fairly, it's not something that, like, some people know bits and pieces, but the vast majority of people who meet me can only talk a bit. Like if I ask them to name 4 Australians, they might be able to name 4, maybe, if they remember Chris Hemsworth's brother, like Liam, and it's like, they'll go, like, they're 4, it'll be Steve Irwin, Hugh Jackman, and the Hemsworth brothers. Those would be the 4 you get, right? Past the 5th, which is maybe Crocodile Dundee, right? Mick Dundee. Past those 5, and you're hard-pressed to find any successful Australian names in American history or in America in general, And again, broadly speaking, that's because we've got fuck all people and we're on a landmass fucking miles away, So it sort of makes sense. But at the same time, like, I feel like Australia is a good example of how a country can be run, or it can be run, you know what I mean? We do only have 24 million people, but I feel like we are, what is it, the happiness index or whatever it's called? Like 5 of our 6 major cities are in the top 10 for livability and whatnot. Like we've got, we support our weakest link as I feel like all nations should, You're only as strong as your weakest link. So in Australia, they focus a lot on making that weak link as least weak as possible. As less weak? I don't know. I feel like I could have worded that better, but you know what I mean. You got more of a chance of not dying of starvation in Australia. Less of a chance of dying of starvation, but also probably less chance of being a millionaire because of the taxes. So it's, One or the other, I guess. But I literally just looked up, and I have been talking now for an hour about why the date should change. And I'm sorry if I was very, very long-winded, and I'm sorry if you disagreed or agreed at any point. Well, I'm not sorry if you agreed or disagreed. Like, those are the facts. I Googled them. I gave my opinions either side of them. But yeah, I feel like Australia, generally speaking, like the most I learned was from Danger Animal shows. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, another thing as well, people talk to me like about Australian animals and stuff, right? And I mean, like, I do catch myself every other day with Shannon being like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do that because you don't have to worry about X, Y, Z, you know, about a redback or something, you know, a spider or, you know, but we also catch ourselves, she'll be talking like, oh, like I just grab spiders in my hands and take them outside and throw them out again. And Shannon's like, what if it bites you? And I'm like, so what if it does? Like, it's not a fucking funnel web. It's not any of the spiders back home. If it bites me, like, ow, that might hurt, but it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen worse. But I do say that, like, it's a bit of a go-to at bars, right, for me as well. Like, Australian animals that are super scary, like the scariest Australian animals, the ones that can do the most damage to you, right, are basically spiders or snakes. Yeah, like in essence, like if you ignore the crocodiles, which are, you know, it's a thing, but like crocodiles, alligators, basically the same thing. You have alligators here, like it's a thing, right? If you ignore the crocodiles, it's basically spiders and snakes that Australians are killed by the most. A spider or a snake is not that scary because you can, like, spider's fucked, right? Kick a snake like a football and it's fucking gone. See you later, you know what I mean? But it's like a spider or a snake, you can easily just see you, mate. I'm bigger than you. I'm higher up on the food chain. It doesn't matter, right? Although, right, in America, you guys have bears, right? And a bear, like a dangerous animal in Australia, right? Like even I'm trying to think of an actual animal that might hurt you. Like even a fucking, like an emu, right? Like if you are getting attacked by an emu, you're probably not going to outrun it, right? Because it's fucking fast. But if you climb a tree, that little fucking bird's not going to do shit, right? Because it can't climb, yeah? If you're running from a fucking something else, some other, like a crocodile, for example, you can probably just add a light jog, outrun it, right? Because it's fucking huge and slithery and trying to get across the ground, right? If you're in water, you're fucked. Don't try and outswim one. But if you're on land, just go for a light jog. You'll be fine, right? You cannot outrun or outclimb a bear or outswim a bear. Like, they are all-terrain, fuck-you-up monsters, right? And I feel like people in America and Canada don't have enough credit or don't give themselves enough credit. Like, it's interesting, you know, to me that people go, oh, there's heaps of scary animals in Australia. And it's like, none that would literally flip my car just by getting their fucking horn things underneath it, like a moose. You know, like a moose is scarier than a fucking kangaroo. But anyway, that's just my philosophy, you know. I feel like there are far scarier animals here than in Australia. But I guess that's a grass is always greener type thing as well, maybe. I don't know. But are citizens allowed to have guns in Australia? That's probably the craziest thing about us. We own so many guns. Yes, we are allowed, but there are a whole bunch of caveats on the, you know, like citizens are allowed to have guns, but you need to prove that you are mentally all there. Like if you've got a diagnosis of any, like I couldn't, you know, like I'm diagnosed with bipolar. And so I am on a list somewhere that then gun shops would have to access, look at that list, search my name for that list. My name would be on it and they would say, no, sir, you are not allowed a gun. Goodbye. And I would not have one sold to me, right? Because I'm bipolar, which means I have the propensity to be impulsive and act before I think. And that plus guns equals generally school shootings, you know? And so there's a broad myriad of things that stop mass shootings being a thing in Australia. I've spoken about it before on the channel. I think there's a gun control live stream. Go and check that out if you want as well. But it's straight up. You got to prove that you're not a schizo. And if you are, like me, then you don't get access to it. They have to be stored separately to their ammunition in a separate safe, and both of them in a safe. So the gun has to be in a safe, and the bullets have to be in another safe. So you have to have two separate safes on the property. Neither of those safes can be within your within like a 2-bedroom space of your where you sleep. So like you have to wake up and actually, generally speaking, it's like an outhouse or a fucking shed or your garage or whatever like that, that you have to go to get this stuff. So you can't just make an impulsive decision to go and get it. And like, it's a lot of time to calm down. You've got to go to 3 different spaces in your fucking house, and they're at other ends of the house to each other, and what else? So basically no loonies like me, no fucking, no, like it's spot checks as well. And it's ridiculously thorough. Like you will get checked once every 2 or 3 fucking months. There will be someone rocking up at your house, either at 12 o'clock in the afternoon or at 2 o'clock in the morning or at any time of the day. And they knock on your door and they inspect and they go, is your gun in a safe in a separate spot? Are the bullets in a safe in a separate spot? And if you're not, you have your license removed and blah, 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 like it's spot checks that are really, really prevalent. And it's, what else? What is there? There's spot checks. There's a 6-month waiting list as well. Like you want a gun, you have to wait 6 months. Like you go in and you go, yeah, right, I want that one. I've passed all the tests. I'm not on any of the lists. So however it works, that's the one I want. 6 months will go by before you get it. And all of those things, I think, like I piss a lot of Americans off when I talk about gun control because I don't think the vast majority of you should have guns, like that colorful haired dude that shot up the Batman theater, right? Like he would not have been able to get his hands on a gun in Australia. Because, Jim Jeffries does a really good bit on it where it's like, you can't, like to buy a gun, you're not just some big autistic dude walking down the docks going, oh, I'd like to buy a gun, please. Like that's not how it works. In Australia, if you want to do bad things with a gun and you want a gun to do bad things with, generally speaking, you need about 40 or 50 grand on the black market to get one. And even then, that's a pissy little shitty gun, right? And so, like, if you have 40 or 50 grand to buy on a pissy little shitty gun, like you're not gonna, you got bigger problems. You got bigger fucking, not problems, but you've got other stuff going on and a gun is not on your mind, Like before I came to America, I'd only ever seen 2 guns in my entire life, right? And both of them were in the holsters of the police officers arresting me. But in America, I've seen like 4 or 5 just from having this conversation with people. Like I had this conversation with my barber, right? My barber was like, oh, Australia, that's like the land of no guns, right? And I was like, well, sort of. Like it's not. It's the land of no unrestricted guns. Like it's the land of if you have a gun, we want to know who you are and what you're doing with it so that you don't go and kill people. But like farmers have guns, hunters have guns. Like some of my best mates are recreational hunters that go out. Like I lived in the sticks, you know what I mean? Like, and they go out to farms and give show all their legitimate details and their stuff. And it means that farmers don't have to go through the rigmarole of getting a gun license. They just hire old mate that has his and that is a professional hunter, and then he goes on their property and kills all the pests and stuff, And it's like it makes sense. And nobody who wants a gun, who is psychologically who society would be okay with having one, can't have one. Like everyone in Australia that wants a gun that is psychologically able to handle the gravitas of owning a weapon of that standard, like the ability to kill someone realistically. If you're not intellectually able to handle a gun, then you are not physically able to handle a gun in Australia either. But it's certainly not a no guns here, like there are plenty of guns. Like it's just only people that need them have them. And if you know what I mean, like I feel like I've said that about 8 times now. Sorry, but yeah, I just kept repeating myself. I'll keep reading the comments. Most people that go out in the woods carry weapons. If only we had a reasonable gun laws. Yeah. So walking around with a loaded gun is not allowed. Well, not really, no. Like unless you're walking around on a farm with foxes like through your scope. Like if you walked down the main street of your town and you had a loaded weapon on you, you would have the police called and the police would rock up and you guys would be having words. You know what I mean? Like there would be issues. And it's because that incites a whole bunch of needless fucking thoughts for everyone. And like I hear the argument of, oh, well, don't even think about me. You just worry about yourself. Like I hear that argument, except that's how you end up getting shot in a mass shooting, is not worrying about the guy with a gun on his hip. Like it's interesting to me that that Americans are so like connected to their guns in a way, if that makes sense. Like I often want to shake people and say, the government has drones, right? Like I understand the whole, you should be allowed to rise up against a tyrannical government and you should be able to fight back and all that sort of stuff. But like, there is literally not a gun you could buy that competes with drones. It's you would not be able to fight back against your government. You, like America, that is, right? Like, no American citizen is taking down the monolith that is the American military complex. They're just not. Like, there are, like, we sell parts of our military expertise off to other countries that we are fighting with and that aren't our allies, because we know that we will have developed even more by the time they know how to use them. You know what I mean? Like, it's a thing. And like, you would literally, if you wanted to rise up against a tyrannical government in America right now, you couldn't, because Donald Trump would have his PlayStation controller with the drones, and I mean, obviously that's ridiculous, reductive language, because it's not Trump that's doing it, and it's all that sort of stuff. You know what I'm saying, though, right? Like, literally, the government would just play with their electronic toys and mow us all down, whether it took 20 years or 30 years or however long it took. You bring in a sword to a gunfight, you're bringing a gun to a drone fight. Those are the same thing. I feel like the time for but like, that's the thing, right? So somebody just commented again saying, I think most people like having it for their own protection from people breaking in and stuff like that, right? So I don't know, like, maybe you're a big deal, right? Like, you don't own any guns. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, maybe it's not you then, but like the people who view the home protection stuff as the reason for the guns, right? Like, who are you pissing off to the point that you're scared for your life? Maybe you need to rearrange some life choices, Like, other than that, no one's breaking into your house to kill you, Like, if somebody breaks into your house, they just want your fucking TV. It's some meth head who needs to score or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's, give him your fucking TV. You'll get it. It's covered by insurance. You'll get it back. Like, there's no need to be macho and end up ending someone's life because they made a poor decision to then end up breaking into your house. You know what I mean? Like, or several poor decisions that led to them making the one that ended up with them breaking into your house. I think that the protection argument about gun control for me is a bit silly, because more people kill themselves with guns than anyone else. So you're not really protecting yourself. You're providing yourself with an impulsive, like, option, you know what I mean, when sad or mad. So it's that I am wary of going too deep on gun control, because, like, I know a lot of my followers, sports loving Americans, are also gun loving Americans, and I don't want to piss those people off, because I fully respect your rights and your desire to maintain your own rights and keep them and stuff. But I think that your right to not be shot by some fucking autistic dude who shouldn't have his hands on a gun outweighs your right to holding a gun, as far as I'm concerned. You should be more concerned with, like, I mean, like, and I understand that, from the protection angle as well, there's a perspective that I can't understand, because I am not a black American, right? And so black Americans, black men specifically, get shot by the police a lot, right? And obviously that's going to piss a lot of people off to say that, but anyone getting shot by the police is in more than one time, for me, is a lot. And by international standards, you guys blow everyone else out of the fucking water, right? Like, the cops kill more citizens in America than the cops in, I would say, broadly speaking, any other country. But that's my perspective, and I'm sure the fucking cops in, like, Saudi Arabia are worse, for example. But of the revolutionized world, not revolutionized world, that was ignorant, of the Western world, the English-speaking world, America is the worst for police killing people, And so, as a black American, or as a black man in America, I can understand, given that the police force is so prevalent in ineptitude, like, the police force is not as competent as police forces in every other nation, right? Like, it's I was going to finish school, but I decided to become a cop instead, right? Like, that sort of shit here in America. And like, you have to have 2 university degrees to be a police officer in Australia. 2 university degrees, one in policing, I'll give you that. But, like, you have to be educated to a high standard before they'll allow you to be a police officer. And I think, like, again, tell me if I'm wrong, right? But from what I can take, it's just like any other regular job here in America where you apply with a resume and you either get it or you don't get it. You know, like there aren't any provisos that I've seen. Like the 4 cops that I've met, 2 in Utah, who were dumb as dog shit, like stupidest people I've ever met in my life, with 2 police officers in Utah. One of which tried to accuse me of forging my passport, and I openly mocked him and laughed in his face about the fact that 2 sets of customs, one in Sydney and one in LA, had missed it, but little regular duties Utah fucking police officer managed to get it right. But it's like, it just feels like to me like it's the Dukes of Hazzard, like the cop in Dukes of, not Enos is like, and I'm talking old school Dukes of Hazzard here, not the Sean William Scott Johnny Knoxville one, but like old school Dukes of Hazzard. The fucking just the ridiculous, like the guy who Boss Hogg owns, what's his name, the sheriff, and how inept he is, and like that is how I picture the American police force. Is well-meaning, kind-hearted men like Enos trying to do their bit for their community and being fucked over by the corrupt under people, sheriffs that are being paid under the table. You know what I mean? And that's what I think about the police force in America. But I understand the argument of, well, they couldn't be the only ones with guns. You can't trust, like, as I was saying, like from a black man's perspective in America, I'm not a black man, but I can understand why, given that the police force in America started out as a slave catching process, like as a slave catching group, and like the Shield then evolved from there with society and is now a police force. Given that they kill so many people, I can understand from a black man's perspective why you might want a gun. Like I get that. I still think it is warped thinking, and that the less guns on the street, the better. But I understand that at least I can protect myself with this one if that one's going to be on the street. Like I get that, and that makes sense. But I think the way to beat that is with a buyback scheme like we had in Australia. We gave people something like 10 times what the gun was worth if you brought it back. And like there is a certain level of fucking poverty that means you are more likely to commit crimes and commit heinous crimes such as murder and rape and all that sort of stuff. There is a direct line, and there is direct metrics between your poverty status and your criminal status, right? And so if we were to buy, and the people who are poverty stricken enough to commit these horrible crimes will be brought in by I'll give you 10 times what your gun's worth. They will go, all right, here's my gun, give me some money, I'm gonna go and buy some food. Again, I know I'm being reductory when I say that, and I'm sort of generalizing too much in that sense. But if we gave people a freedom dividend at the same, like Andrew Yang's talking about, at the same time we took guns away, there would be less teething issues. If we put in a buyback scheme to buy back all the guns, and then people say, oh, then only the criminals have the guns. And it's like, yeah, the criminals that could afford not to fucking blah, 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 and it's like, it's a process, and I don't have all the answers, and I went off on a massive tangent, but yeah, basically, yes, Australians can have guns, just nowhere near as many. And as a result, like we treat it as an actual weapon, like we don't treat it as a toy. We don't treat it as just like a TV or a fucking car or something like that. Like actually, right, cars have more legislation on them here in America. Like I wasn't allowed to go and register a car because I don't have a social security number. I can go and buy a gun if I want that. Like, make sense of that, right? Make sense of that. But anyway, I don't know. The National Rifle Association has been legally bribing government, lobbying, right? Bribing government officials, lobbying, there we go, for decades. So any suggestions for stricter regulations equals they're taking away our rights for many people. Yeah, that's the thing. We've got like a shitload of like lobby groups that fuck over our system in Australia as well. But most of ours is to do with coal mining and coal in general, and mining in general, and that sort of stuff. So it's, I understand the lobby groups taking away the logic of a discussion, and yeah, the NRA would be a big one. Cops killing people is honestly a big issue. They pull the trigger too fast and too much. Well, yeah, exactly. But they wouldn't if they didn't have to, like you'd think, and again, I'm waxing lyrical here, generalizing massively, but you would think if as the gun is that's a Freudian slip, isn't it? As the cop is approaching the window, right? If he's not thinking, fuck, is this guy going to have a gun, right? If he knows in his heart of hearts that the absolute worst thing he's going to cop out of that window is a flying fist or some spit, he is not going to be as likely to shoot someone. You know, like you will have less cop deaths because you'll have less trigger-happy cops shitting themselves because there will be less guns on the street. You know what I mean? That's the logic that makes sense in my head anyway. Yeah, what's your reaction vid? Sup, my boy? Hey, how you doing, man? You have to go through training, but I don't think it's much. Not as easy as just applying. Maybe that differs per state. Yeah, who knows, right? But like legitimately, you have to have like years of training, not just the actual degree in policing, but you got to go to police academy. Like you've got to legit, and that's not just a movie with a sound effects guy. And those were good movies though. But yeah, it's ridiculous to me, you know, like the notion that policing isn't of the same standard requirement as being a doctor or being a lawyer. You know, like I feel like here in America, people go, oh yeah, doctors and lawyers. You've got to, you know, if you want to be a high-ranking member of society, you've got to do well in all your education aspects and hit this level of attainment, and you might be able to be a doctor or a lawyer. But for policing, it's sort of an afterthought of, if you know what I mean. Like no one's going, oh, if you want to be a cop, you've got to be this level smart. You know, it's just you've got to have not broken laws, basically. You know, which I think is strange. But like yeah, that's another thing as well. In Australia, you can't be a cop if you've broken the law, and I think that's dumb. As just like if you've been like, I mean, not broken the law. Like you can have driving offences and all that sort of stuff, but like you can't have like an assault charge and be a police officer, or you can't have like like the bigger crimes as opposed the ones that actually matter, not the car related ones. But I think that's silly, you know, like if you've arrested me for fucking absolutely knocking someone out with my fists, why wouldn't you try and harness that and employ it as well, you know, like given that you need some people to be doing that anyway. But that's just me being ignorant. Where are we? Look, if everybody got guns, you know, I'm having one, but mate, 40,000 gun murders in America last year, 664 in Canada, estimated 20 million guns in Canada. Well, yeah, legislation. Again, you legislate and you make the bottom line better. If you make the weakest link as strong as it can be, then people are going to be less likely to lash out. You know, I feel like it's the economic system here in America and the lack of safety nets that causes the most gun crime, not the guns existing in general. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, if you have strict tests on who can and who can't have a gun, less gun deaths occur. That's a fact, you know. And I wouldn't like, and that's the thing. Like I've come to America and I could go and get a gun if I wanted to, and we've spoken about it a couple of times because we had, you know, people in our attic before, like without us realizing, and we had people like there have been not like home invasions where we've had anything stolen, but there have been people come into our house without us being aware, and while we were asleep and stuff like that. And it does make you think, like especially with a baby on the way, you know, with my wife being pregnant and we've got a 5-year-old in the house as well, you know, like it from a man's perspective, it makes me think quite often about what I can be doing or should be doing to protect my family and our household and everything like that. But I think the ultimate protection would be creating a society for us to live in that those people didn't do those things and couldn't do those things. You know what I mean? I feel like a gun in this household would end up being used in a way that it wasn't intended when we brought it into the household. You know what I mean? And so yeah, less guns is more good is my perspective. But I'm going to wrap the live stream up because I'm getting freaking hungry and it's 6:10 and I've got to make something for Sophia as well because Shannon's gone to work and whatnot. And yeah, this has been a real fun live chat. An hour and 23 minutes. First hour or so, if you're still watching this, like fucking kudos, credit to you guys. Well done. But if you're just tuning in now and you want to know for once it's uploaded and all that sort of stuff, the first hour or so I spoke about Australia Day and why the date of Australia Day should change, and why I feel like Australia Day and the date is contentious and why it's controversial and how long it's been controversial for and all that sort of stuff. Basically, I blurted out for about 55 minutes to an hour about Australia Day, which is our equivalent of July 4th. Like Independence Day sort of thing. And then, yeah, the last 20 minutes or so I've been talking about gun control and America, broadly speaking. All-Star game starts in an hour or so, I think, an hour or two for the NHL. So that'll be fun to watch. Go Metro division. But yeah, what else? What else is there? That's about it. I'm going to pee, cook some food. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thank you. Big thanks to Tim for being a conversation starter. Suds over Spill as well. You're awesome. CJ, like, what would I do without you? You are a legend. You are the I was about to say the water I walk on then, but that was awfully Jesus-like, making myself sound Jesus-like, and that's not what I meant. And yeah, Sean and Dark Eyes, if you guys are still here as well, well done for sticking it out. I'm a head off. I'm going to end this stream. Thanks for watching. I'll see you when I look at you, and you'll see me when you look at me.